In a couple of weeks, the President of the United States is going to address our nation in something called the State of the Union Address. And in a State of the Union Address, a president, commander-in-chief, will answer a lot of the questions that are going on and issues that people have and wondering what is going on and where are we headed. When you read Matthew 5, 6, and 7, the Sermon on the Mount, it is kind of like Jesus' universal address. He's kind of dealing with the issues that will universally the world experiences and the questions that we have about life and the questions we have about the world in which you and I live. And I really believe that you can reduce down all the questions that we have to four primary questions of life. And the first one is, what is real? What is most real? The second one is, what is the good life? We all want to know, what is the good life? Thirdly, who is a good person? And fourthly, how do you become a good person? And I'm going to suggest that in your life, you will have to answer these four questions. You may not ever sit down in a classroom where somebody sits down and, hey, take the test, and these are the four questions, and you answer them. But you cannot escape this world without answering these questions, and you will answer them somehow by the way you live your life. Now, in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus does answer these four questions quite clearly. And the first one is, what is real? What is most real? And he says, God and his kingdom is most real. That is what real. Jesus is making it very clear that the foundation of human existence, this thing that you and I call, this existence you and I live in, is not some random universe. It is not this meaningless machine of quarks and photons. All of human existence is built on a person, and that person is God himself. And what is the most real in this world, in the universe, is the presence of God, his will, his reign, and his kingdom. So what is a good person? What does it mean? What is the good life? What is the good life? Hey, we all want to know what the good life is. And sometimes we think the good life means that you are someone who has a lot of wealth, or you have a high IQ, or you have this certain sort of attractiveness about you, and you have a full head of hair, and you got perfectly white teeth. But that's not what it is at all. Whoever has the good life is someone who lives in partnership with God. That anyone who lives in partnership with God, in a relationship with God, in his kingdom, that God uses you and you help create the good life for yourself and for everybody else. Who is a good person? Now that's something we're all a little fuzzy about. We get a little fuzzy about who is really good, but the scriptures are clear. It's anyone who is pervaded by God's love. It's just that simple. That's what Jesus says. It's anyone who's just so overwhelmed by the love of God and it oozes out of them. Sometimes we think that a good person is someone who follows all the rules. A good person is someone who believes all the right things. And I will tell you, following Jesus is not just about believing all the right things and doing all the right thing rules. It's not it. That's why he says in the scriptures, in Matthew 5, 6, and 7, he says, hey, you have heard that it was said, behavior compliance, follow the rules, but I say to you, and then it's more about inner transformation. It's just pervaded by love. So how do you become a good person? Don't we all want to know? How do you do that? Well, really, it's kind of simple. It's just having full confidence in Jesus. Putting your full confidence in Jesus and asking him to be your Lord, your Savior. That is, you become his disciple. You ask him to be your teacher. You become his student. You become his apprentice. And you actually practice what he teaches you. Don't just believe in it. You actually practice it and apply it to your life. There is a reason why Matthew 5, 6, and 7 have stood the test of time. And why Matthew 5, 6, and 7 is known as the most famous talk in the history of human existence. And there's no other talk like it. And it's because these four questions have been answered by Jesus in Matthew 5, 6, and 7 like no other person has ever answered these questions with such wisdom and basic practical guidance in the things that matter to you and me most, and that's our relationships. And not only that, no human being has ever tried to teach about these things, who was able to actually do them himself to perfection. To perfection. And some 2,000 years later, people are still inspired trying to follow and practice what this guy teaches. So if you're here today to start off the new year, or you're here because you're looking for a church home, or you're here because someone invited you and kind of forced you to be here, hey, you're in luck, because at least you come here tomorrow. If you go to work or you go back to school, you go back to college, and they just kind of have a test and they say, hey, listen, tell me, what are the 4 questions of life? You now know. And not only that, you can say, I know the answer. So you're a lot further along than a lot of people already. And this really has nothing to do with the message. This is just bonus material. This is just kind of help you get started. Now, we're going to start off 2023, if you call this your home, by going back to where we started in September, the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapter 6, looking at verse 1. Only one verse this morning, just one verse. We'll be finish up the whole thing in May, this whole book in May, of Matthew 5, 6, 7, Sermon on the Mount. But one verse. And what we're going to see is Jesus issues a warning about a common little mistake that was going on in his day, but it also goes on today. And I want you to notice it's a warning. So verse 1, chapter 6, Matthew. He says, be careful, that means it's a warning. Be careful not, that adds to the warning, be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of other people, to be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven. Now, Jesus is addressing a condition that was very prominent in his day. In our day, we call it, in your notes, approval addiction. An approval addiction is performing to impress others. It's to live in bondage to the opinion of somebody else. It's living your life in such a way to have other people pleased with you. Some folks call it the disease to please. Now, this is going on in Matthew chapter 6 in some very powerful ways. And Jesus expands upon it in the first few verses of Matthew chapter 6. Because there are people there, very devout in giving, very devout in praying, very devout in fasting, but they're doing it publicly, so other people will give them a pat on the back and say, good job, good job, good job, I approve you, to be pleased by them. Now, we live in a much different kind of culture. We're not nearly as religious. But the underlying temptation still lives there for all of us in different ways. Maybe not necessarily in your praying, maybe not necessarily in your giving, maybe not in your fasting or your serving, and maybe it is. But in your work. You work in such a way, showing up early, going late, to get someone else to see, to pat you on the back. Maybe in how you take care of your body, you take care of your health, and you talk about it a lot. And though you're trying to take care of you, you really want other people to see and go, yeah, good job, good job, good job. Maybe in how you eat. Maybe it's how your family is. You're just so proud, and rightfully so, about your family, about who you're about to marry. And so you just talk about them, and so people will say, oh, yeah, that's awesome. You got a great thing going on, because we hunger and seek that approval. And when you're doing that, you're feeding your own ego. If you're someone who's an approval junkie, you're trying to feed this inner need with yourself of your ego for someone else to give you an attaboy to say you are okay. And the danger is this: you're making a mess of your life, and not only yours, but the people around you, because they feel manipulated. They never know if you're just giving them a straight shot or you're using them to take care of yourself. And not only that, if someone knows that you're an approval junkie and you go to them and they let you know, you're going to be disappointed, because if they figure out you're an approval junkie, they're not going to give you approval. And so it creates this contention, this dysfunction in the relationship. Now, here's where we're going to go this morning. I want to expand a little bit on your understanding what approval addiction really looks like. That's the first thing. Then why it's a problem. Then we're going to look at the alternative. What is the alternative to being an approval addict, approval junkie? And then what are the consequences if I don't get rid of this? Well, what's the consequences? And then lastly, what's a couple of antidotes that Jesus gives us that we can practice in our life to help us overcome this need for everybody to always be patting us on the back and approve of us? So we're going to start off with expanding on understanding what approval addiction is. Now, letter B there in your notes, you'll see there a concept about a book called Popular that I suggest for some of you might want to get this book. It's very simple to read. It's easy to follow, by Mitch Prinstein, and he talks about our need to be popular. And he does all this research about human beings, goes all the way back to high school, says this is when it's born, this need for you and me, for other people to approve us through our popularity. That when you go into high school, and you're about 14 years of age, things chemically start to happen in your brain. And when that begins to happen in your brain, your greatest need in your life becomes for other people to approve of you, to affirm you, to tell you you're okay. And all the research has shown that as you age and you develop in years, that little place in your brain where that happened, that doesn't go back or go forward, it kind of stays there. That you and I continually, all of our life, in some ways have a need for approval, for other people to say, you're okay, I believe in you, you're good, you're all this sort of stuff, so to kind of puff and build us up. Now, he talks about this sort of popularity thing in two different ways and says there's two different kinds of popularity. And the first one there in your notes is status. And status is how I impress others. How I impress others. And it's interesting what they found in this research of all these high school students particularly, all across our nation. That it turns out that the captain of the football team and the head of the cheerleaders are some of the most miserable people on earth. Even though they're the most popular. Even though they have the highest status. So they found this one woman in this survey, this young lady whose name was Alexandra. You'll read, if you get the book, you'll see this. Talks about Alexandra. She's tall, she's very attractive, she's very smart. She's the queen of her little circle. So they surveyed the whole school. Who's the most popular girl in school? Everybody, 100%, without question, it's Alexandra. She is the most popular person in school. Second question was, who is the most disliked person in the school? Who do you think it was? Alexandra. Most popular, most disliked. She was gossipy, she was needy, she was mean, she was excluded, all those sort of things. Now, there was another level of popularity they found. It's called likability. And in your notes, they define that as being others-centered. Being others-centered. It's what Jesus called being a loving person. So let's think about those two different ones. A status-focused person, a status-seeking person, is someone who's always focused upon themselves. A likable person that everybody likes is someone who's focused on other people. A person who is self-focused on seeking status is someone who always talks about themselves. You go out to dinner, they talk about themselves. They talk about their kids. They talk about their job. They talk about their health. They talk about their issues. They talk about what they did. The person who's a likable person, they're focused on you. They ask about you. They want to know about your life. They want to know about your family, your friends, your job, your health. If you hang out with a person who's a status-seeking sort of person, when you hang out with them, you feel like you're invisible. You don't feel very important. You feel like you're not even there. But if you hang out with a so-called popular, likable person, you feel like you want to be your best self because the focus is on you and lifting you up to the highest degree possible. Now, interestingly enough, what Prinstein defines as the person who's really a likable person, there are three qualities that they have. They are trustworthy. They genuinely care about other people. And number three, they're always wanting good things to happen to other people. All three of those things summarize one little word that Jesus talks about in the scripture. It's a word you and I call kind of churchy because we use it in churchy ways, but it's a good word, and the word is righteous. A person who's right in their relationship with God, who's right between themselves and God and right with other people. That's exactly what he's describing, a likable person who focuses on other people. Now, what's the problem? What's the problem with suffering with approval addiction? In your notes, number 2, I can never get enough. You just never get enough. People who study this, they call it this excessive reassurance seeking. That people who have an approval addiction, they're always asking questions. Well, how'd I do? Did that go okay? They're always looking for a kind of a thumb. Did that get good? Did you like that? Was it good enough? They're always apologizing. They're always saying, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Not really because they're sorry, because they need you to say, it's okay, don't worry about it, it's okay, you have nothing to apologize for, because in the end, they're manipulating you to get what they need from you. That is your approval. By the way, is this message going okay? Do y'all approve of it? I just need to know. I'm feeling a little insecure right now. I just need you to say something, make sure, okay? So this is a huge issue. This is why social media, young people, please listen, young people, but this is not just true for young people, also grown-up people. This is why social media is so dangerous. It's why it's so addicting. If you're someone who's always going back to your social media platform to look at your post, to go check out the views and how many likes, how many people approve, and you keep going back to check, I don't care how old you are. It could be you're an approval junkie. That you need that affirmation to feel good about yourself. I find it fascinating on YouTube. There are over 250,000 videos, short little videos on how to take a selfie. The perfect selfie. 250,000 videos on how to take a good picture of yourself. You gotta be kidding me. Can I tell you what there's not on YouTube? There's not a single video of how to die to your perfect little selfie. Not a single one. Because we hunger for more, we hunger. What is the alternative? The alternative, number 3 in your notes, is to live for an audience of one. Soren Kierkegaard, he talked about this idea, this Danish philosopher. He says, I live for an audience of one, and that person is God. Now, even if you get to that point right there and you say, yes, I'm going to live for an audience of one, and that person is God, you are acknowledging you need approval from somebody. You recognize that you need an affirmation from someone outside yourself to tell you you're okay and you're good. And we all do. God made you that way. Think about a baby. Think about this little thing called a baby. Don't you love it when you see a little baby and you're out in the crossing and you walk up to the child and you start speaking to the child and you say, oh, child, you're so smart, you're so beautiful, and you just pour love into the kid. This kid just starts beaming, right? They just start glowing. They just start just radiating, just full of life and full of joy. And nobody would look at that and say that's a bad thing. You would say that's a great thing. And I will tell you, it is a great thing. When you hear from God those very same things, you're beautiful, you're delightful, I approve of you, I believe in you, I want you. That is a good thing. Go seek it, go look for it. And Jesus is saying in the Word, believe in me, live in my kingdom. You can be a good person. You can have the good life. And I will give it to you, and I approve of you. If you will live in a daily relationship with me, you will hear from me all you need of being approved. Can I tell you something? There's no human being on this earth that has an eternal, unlimited approval to give out. But God has unlimited approval, and He never gets tired of giving it to His kids that He loves. And you get to choose. Whose approval are you going to seek? Who are you going to live for? In the scriptures, there's so many warnings about this. The Apostle Paul in Galatians chapter 1, verse 10, he's asked, am I now trying to win the approval of human beings or of God? Am I trying to please people? If I were still trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Christ. No, I wouldn't. I'd be manipulating others. I'd be calculating. I'd be figuring out how I can get likes and views from all these people. I'd be doing that. John himself, over in the Gospel of John, chapter 12, he's talking about a group of people. He puts it this way: they loved human praise more than praise from God. And then over here, the Apostle Paul again, in 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 3, he says, I care very little if I'm judged by you or by anybody. But really, those first four words there are kind of the not complete, perfect translation from the Greek. It really should say, I don't care if I'm judged by you. I don't care. That'd be a better translation. I want you to take those three words home with you this week into your week. I don't care. In fact, I want you to practice. Say those out loud with me right now. I don't care. Say with me. I don't care. One more time with conviction. I don't care. When someone comes up to you and they can tell they're a fashionista, and they look at your clothing, they look at how you're dressed, and you can tell they don't approve of how you're dressed, what are you going to say? And if somebody comes into your home, and they look at your home, and it's not as clean as they think it should be, or it's not decorated because they're a professional decorator, and they look at it with kind of a disdain, what are you going to say out loud? What are you going to say? And if you're listening to your music, and you love your music, but somebody older, younger, whatever comes, and they don't approve of your music, what are you going to say? And you're at work, and you're trying to be creative, offer these great, awesome ideas, and you can tell by looking around the circle, there are people that really don't approve of your ideas. What are you going to say? And when you're driving down the highway and a police officer pulls you over because they don't approve of how fast you're going, what are you going to say? I really care, sir. I really care, man. Hey, there's just some things you got to care about. When you say, I don't care, you're not saying, I don't care about you. You are saying, I live for an audience of one, and you're not the one. That's all you're saying. And you learn to say it in a way that is not mean-spirited, that is not judgmental. You may not even say it out loud, but you say it in your soul, and you believe it. That's okay. I live for an audience of one. And when you're at peace with that, now, church, you may not, we all do this in some way. And back here in Matthew chapter 6, they're doing this. And they're just trying to give out loud. People can see them, and they're praying out loud. They're fasting out loud because they want, and they say it's because they love God. And just say, that's hypocrisy. You're not doing that because you love me. You're doing this just because you need other people to pat you on the back and tell you how awesome you are. And what are the consequences if you and I do that? If we stick in that people-pleasing, approval addiction mindset. Over here in Matthew chapter 6, we're told the second part of verse 1. I'll read it again. If you do this, you'll have no reward from your Father in heaven. The consequence, letter A, no rewards, and you should put in there, please add, from God. No rewards from God. Now, when we read over the next couple of weeks in Matthew, we're going to learn more about this concept of rewards. And it's a tough concept to wrap your head around. And some folks really kind of, what are you talking about, rewards? I thought it was about grace. It's not about doing this so I get that. Real quickly, C.S. Lewis helps us kind of wrap our head around this understanding of rewards. And he divides them up like this. In your notes, extrinsic rewards are received from the outside connected to what I'm doing. So an extrinsic, I do something, I do whatever it is I do, and naturally from the outside, I get some benefit coming back to me from the outside. That's extrinsic. Intrinsic reward is is something I experience on the inside connected to who I am becoming. To who I'm becoming. So let's do a little test to make sure you understand the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic rewards. So you marry someone for their money. They're really rich. They got a lot of money. And when you marry them, that makes you rich. Is that extrinsic or intrinsic reward? You got a 50-50 chance. Don't be afraid of answering, okay? That's extrinsic, right? But if you marry someone for love, because you really love them, that's an intrinsic reward because on the inside, you experience love, and that love begins to change and transform you on the inside and helps you become a different person. Let's say that you're in school or you're at work and they have you take this test. and you're trying to get the best grade possible, highest GPA in the class, get the summa cum laude or whatever those sort of things you're shooting for, or the best kind of accolade, Employee of the Month award because you got this, and you want everybody to know it's going to get posted. When it gets posted and you were that person, is that an extrinsic or an intrinsic reward? It's extrinsic. But what if you study and learn for the joy of learning, for the intellectual challenge that challenges your brain and your mind to grow and to expand? That's intrinsic. The person you are becoming, because it's on the inside that's happening. Let's say that you choose to go buy a 1968 convertible Corvette, blue with a tan rag top, and you go and buy that thing for prestige because it's status, it makes you popular around town. Is that intrinsic or extrinsic? Extrinsic. But if you go and buy that beauty because it's just elegant, it's speed and power, and you're going to give it to your pastor as an expression of how much you love your pastor, is that intrinsic or You get the point. Listen, don't dismiss when you read the Bible that God wants to give you rewards. That's not a bad thing. But it's more about the person you are becoming and setting you free from the tyranny of approval addiction. It's about what God's doing on the inside of you, not what you're receiving from the outside. The Bible talks a lot about rewards. It does. And we misunderstand them. He talks about these spiritual things by using tangible physical evidence. Like when you die, you get to heaven, you're going to get a reward of music, right? And you think, gosh, that means I'm going to get a harp and I'll sit on the cloud and play. No, he's not saying that at all. It's saying when you get to heaven, there's going to be a reward of a joy that is so deep that words by itself can't communicate it. It talks about when you get to heaven, if you're a saint, you're going to get a crown. And you're going to throw that crown down at the foot of Jesus. Does that mean you're going to get this little metal tin little thing with spikes on top of it? No, that's not what it means at all. It means that you're going to have this crown, you're going to play at the feet of Jesus, that in sincere humility and admiration, you're going to be in awe of who God is and the joy of fully being known by Him. You're going to sit on a throne. When you get to heaven, the reward of sitting on a throne, so the saints will sit on a throne. Does that mean you get a cushy chair? No. It means you sit along with God in dominion and partnership with God over the good things that He is continuing to do in the world. It is so much bigger than what you and I think. C.S. Lewis puts it this way about the rewards. I love this statement. There is no need to be worked up by facetious people who try to make the Christian hope of heaven ridiculous by saying they do not want to spend eternity playing harps. The answer to such people is that they can not understand books written for grown-ups. They should not talk about them. People who take these symbols literally might as well think when Christ told us to be like doves, He meant we should lay eggs. You got to learn how to read the Bible to understand the higher level of things that He is talking about. That you will be set free from the tyranny. When you learn to get away from that approval addiction, you'll be set free from that. You'll have a peace that comes from knowing you are loved by God, even if other people don't love you. You'll have a joy of being to do things for other people without them patting you on the back. And you'll have the security that your identity is in who God says you are, not who a bunch of other people say you are. And you can be happy, and you can be good, and you can be calm, even when unjustly people look at you and they frown their eyes and look like, oh yeah. They raise their voice real high and yell or kind of say sarcastic things. And you're on the road and somebody honks at you unjustly. You can still be calm and steady because you don't need what they have to say of you because you live for the approval of God Himself and you're becoming more like Jesus. How do you know if you're an approval addict? Your life will tell you. In 1988, there was a little book written called Glittering Images by a woman who used to write romance novels. But her marriage went south, and she experienced much suffering. So she moved to London, England, to get away from it all. and she lived across from this beautiful, beautiful cathedral. And in the shadow of that cathedral, she met the love of Jesus, and she started writing different books. And she wrote this book called Glittering Images about a pastor who on the outside appeared to have everything together, but on the inside, he had all this hidden brokenness and all this stuff going on, but he didn't want anybody else to know about it. I graduated from seminary 2 years after that book first came out. One of the gifts I was given anonymously by a member of this church was that book. I got it again on my birthday. I've got 2 or 3 more over the years. My name is Rick. I'm an approval junkie, and I don't care if you like me or not. Do you like me? You still do, don't you? I just want to make sure. Hey, can I make you a promise? Not everybody in the world is going to like you. God did not make you to seek universal likability. He made you to be faithful to Him and to be obedient to Him. And that means sometimes people don't like you, even in the church. I thought when I became a youth pastor, back dark in the dark age, everybody would like me. Because they're church people, they have to like me. The pastor didn't even like me, and he told me, I don't like you, Rick. I don't know why we hired you. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. I want you to think of it this way. Think of it like this. And we'll get the cameras to help you. Everybody is made with 2 basic human needs. The first one is to be known. That's K-N-O-W-N, known. The second one is to be accepted. Every human being is made to need to be known and to be accepted. That's just the way you're wired. You may be getting this, you may be getting none of it. You may be getting a lot of this, you may be getting none of it. But if you are accepted and you're not known, what you wind up doing is living a life that is an illusion. And what I mean by that is you live out of your false self. That's what's happening in Matthew chapter 6. They're living on the outside. Hey, I'm praying, I'm fasting, I'm giving, I'm doing all this stuff. But you're not doing it because you love God. And on the inside, you got all this stuff going on. So you live under this false self. You don't want people to really know you. You just want them to accept you. So you don't let them know everything about you because you're afraid if they know, they won't accept you. There are too many churches and too many church people who live right here. And you wonder why your marriage is in trouble. You wonder why your kids grow up dysfunctional. You wonder. If you are not known and you're not accepted, you choose to live in isolation. Before the pandemic, this was an epidemic. Now it is the pandemic. People choosing to live in isolation. And when you choose for nobody to really know you and to risk people really accepting you, you'll begin to die in your soul. You will shrivel up. I see it happen all the time. And then if you are known, if you're known but you're not accepted, you experience the most painful thing of all, and that is rejection. And this is the most painful place to live, is to live right there in that place of rejection. You know what I'm talking about. I think it's fascinating over in the end of Genesis chapter 2, and talking about the creation, Adam and Eve. It says, Adam and Eve, it says, they were naked, they were fully known, and they were not ashamed, they were fully accepted. But then Genesis 3 happens. And they start covering up because they're not accepted. And all hell breaks loose. Literally. I remember I was a May birthday, which means I was the youngest in my class. And so I was always the smallest of the guys in my class. And between my freshman and sophomore years, all the football players were going to the lake to kind of bond. And I'm getting ready to start to be a sophomore, but I'm 6 foot my full height, but I'm just a string bean of a kid of about 130, 140 pounds sopping wet. My hands were fully grown. My feet were fully grown, but I was just a skinny little thing. And everybody took their shirt off, and I made the mistake of taking my shirt off. What do you think happened with all those big testosterone advanced juniors and seniors when they looked at my little body? I'll tell you what happened. Rejection! And you know what I did? I went, isolation! I put my shirt back on really quick. Because I felt shamed and rejected. We could stay here for a long time. Until you learn to accept yourself for how you're made and not be ashamed of who you are and be willing to risk being rejected, you'll never be fully known. You wonder why your marriage is in trouble. You're living in one of these three places right here because there's an issue with being accepted and being fully known. I said, I'm never going to let anybody see me without my shirt off again. And for a long time that didn't happen. And then I met this woman. Her name was Dallas. And finally I figured out she loved me. And she would not judge me. And she would accept me, even though she knew me. And I thought, we've been married 10 years. I can take my shirt off. And she did. 44 years later. She knows me, and she still accepts me. When you go to an AA meeting, the first thing that happens, you start taking little steps toward being known, and you stand up and you hear and you say, my name is Rick, and I am. And you just say it. And you're risking that they're going to accept you and not reject you, but you're bracing yourself to be rejected. But you know what happens in an AA group, in a recovery group? They accept you. They say, hi, Rick. You're welcome here. And you know what you experience when that happens? Love. When you are fully known and you are fully accepted, that's the only time you can fully know love. This is life. This is freedom. This is joy. This is the good life. This is where good people experience what it is to be good. This is the kingdom of God. This is the church. This is the mission. This is who we are to be, fully known and fully accepted. Church, it's the heart of the gospel. It is. And I will tell you, if you're not fully known and fully accepted, you do not yet want to know what love is. You're playing little games with love. God is love. So how do you do that? What are the antidotes? Quickly, here's two. One is the spiritual discipline of secrecy. That's exactly what it's talked about in Matthew chapter 6, not just in verse 1, but the following verses we're going to learn about. That this unseen God sees what you do in secret. And when he sees what you do in secret, you get a reward. And the reward is the person you are becoming, getting set free from the tyranny of the approval of other people. So this week, do good things in secret for other people. People you don't like. People who don't like you. And don't tell anybody. Don't tell your spouse. Don't write it in your journal. Don't tell a child. Don't tell a boss. Don't tell anybody in your small group. Tell no one. And over time, see how you are set free. And you find a joy. And you find a peace because you are becoming a new person. Here's the second one, is a spiritual discipline of community. Find a place where a group of people can know you and you can be fully accepted. Hey, when you leave here today, you're going to get a list of all these different classes that we have coming up about parenting classes, grief classes, money matter classes, single parents, parenting, resilient parenting, grief share. I could go on and on and on. There's little classes, in these little communities, you will get to know other people and they'll accept you and you'll experience love. You got to get in one of those little groups. I encourage you. You don't live over here. That's why Wilson's here. Some of you have been wondering the whole time, why is Wilson up here? I want y'all to say hi to Wilson. Hey, Wilson. You know, Wilson comes from the movie Tom Hanks and Castaway when he was on this island, isolated all by himself for years, and he was dying of loneliness. And so he took his own blood and he painted it on this volleyball and he made it his friend. And he fully knew Wilson, and Wilson if you saw the movie, you know what I'm talking about. And they were just bonded. There was just a deep love there. And finally, Hanks, at the end of the movie, he decides he's going to swim off and get on a raft and try to get back to humanity. And he takes Wilson with him. And he's risking his life to come back home. And Wilson falls off, and he's drifting away. And the look on Tom Hanks' face shows the desperation of loss when he sees Wilson drifting away. And I want to remind you of that look, of what was on his face. So see this short little clip. It's about 2 minutes, and then we're going to get you out of here. See this.
Where's Wilson? Wilson, where are you? Wilson! 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 I'm coming! Wilson! 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 Wilson!
Not because of a volleyball.
Wilson!
Because of the heart of Tom Hanks.
I'm sorry! I'm sorry, Wilson!
That his relationship
Wilson,
with this,
I'm sorry!
in his mind, of a
I'm sorry!
volleyball Wilson,
Wilson!
gave him life.
I can't! Wilson!
They had community.
Wilson!
Fully known and fully accepted. You cannot live without community. You won't make it. And that's the heart of the gospel. That Jesus saw you drifting away. God saw you just drifting away, lost at sea, and he couldn't stand it. And he loved you so much that he sent his son into the world, Jesus, to come after you. And he swam after you. He didn't go back to the raft. He went on a cross, and he was rejected by everyone. He was rejected. The greatest pain, his own kids rejected him. If your children have ever rejected you, you know the pain that Jesus felt, a little idea. And yet he stayed on that cross and he died that you might experience this. Fully known and fully accepted through the love and the grace of a man named Jesus. online in the house this year, please. Start off the year, maybe just make a decision to really follow Jesus, to practice his teachings in your life. Start doing things in secret, not for the approval of others. Start serving, giving, doing things in secret, and then get into a community. Get into a place where people can really, really know you and still accept you and see what happens in your life. Don't do life alone, and don't do life without God. Don't do it. So God, we give you thanks for all the great things you have done for our lives through this person of Jesus. And God, I pray for anyone who finds himself stuck in just a place of rejection. They feel it at work, they feel it in their home, they feel it in their life, or anyone, God, who knows the pain of isolation. And they have chosen, God, to retreat from the world because they don't feel known or accepted by anyone, and they're just stuck in this private hell. And for those, God, who just refuse to allow others to really know them, so they kind of live a half kind of life, this place of illusion, pretending, but on the inside, they're stuck and they're dying. Oh, my God, please lead us all into the sea of love, to swim in the sea of your grace, that you might transform us to be more like Jesus and bring health to our marriages, to our kids, and to our grandkids, and to this world who needs to experience the good life here and in heaven. In Jesus' name, amen. Hey, I'm praying for you. Please pray for me.